Hi there, you're listening to a recording of my review and interpretation of the book How Not to Age by Dr. Michael Gregor. This video will be covering the preface and the introduction of the book. So, the book How Not to Age was a book released by Dr. Michael Gregor, MD, in December of 2023. It's a pretty new book. It covers a variety of anti-aging topics and what is currently available in the evidence-based practice, evidence-based medicine for practical anti-aging techniques that can be achieved through accessible diet and lifestyle changes. The goal of these types of presentations is to allow me to better my ability to lecture on complex scientific subjects with ease, and then also to be able to provide the listeners with a sense of direction in how they can improve any sort of, health metric that they're currently wanting to work on. This book opens with a quote from the former president of the Gerontological Society of America. Gerontology means, honestly, the study of old age. And the former president stated about anti-aging that few subjects have been more misleading to the uncritical and more profitable to the unscrupulous. Diet and anti-aging industries are both multi-billion-dollar behemoths. They are very tempting industries in which promoting products that do not work runs rampant. The anti-aging industry in the United States is estimated to be worth around $88 billion and around $292 billion worldwide. And these anti-aging products can range from wrinkle creams to powders, supplements, any type of product or service that claims to be anti-aging. So 60% of Americans 65 and older are currently pursuing anti-aging interventions. However, in most instances, these interventions are not supported by science, but they sound like it. I think that in trudging through the anti-aging literature, it's very important to recognize similarities with, your industry that you work in. So any type of industry profession has its own type of vocabulary and verbiage to describe the products, systems, and just kind of what gets done in that type of industry on a daily basis. Unfortunately, this happens with medicine, and especially in anti-aging, where several people a lot of the public doesn't understand, what a certain word or phrase means. That has to do with a lot of medical vocabulary being linked back to Latin. So you're never stupid because you don't understand what is being said. You just don't understand Latin. So it's something to keep in mind. So these types of anti-aging treatments with no scientific backing, getting back to the subject at hand, they've been around for decades, if not centuries at this point. In the 19th century, for example, advances in magnetism led to ads selling magnetoconservative underwear. This sprang up in popularity due to recent discoveries around magnetism and magnetic properties. So, of course, you need to put it in your underwear. Marie Curie's work in radiation led to radium water, which, to quote the Wall Street Journal headline, worked fine until his jaw came off. I really advise to not Google the images. You will see someone with no jaw. Modern examples of this type of quackery are stem cells. So stem cells aren't necessarily illegitimate. It's just one of those areas that's becoming rampant with either fraudulent therapy, like fraudulent clinics, or these clinics themselves are advertising cures. There are a lot of consumer protections in place in selling and promoting, certain therapies that can cure things. You can't really say that. So I do want to say that there are ongoing debates between the Gerontological Society and groups like the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. So the AM objects to the idea that aging is inevitable, nothing can be done, get used to it, grow old, and die. They're very against this mentality, and they've come out publicly and called gerontological ideas and practices around this idea to be a death cult. There are pros and cons to both sides, and I think there is a very realistic view versus an optimistic view. Aging research had to do a lot of hard work to gain the public funding to the levels they do now, but the AM wants to ambitiously challenge the status quo and challenge these arcane views that aging is natural and inevitable. It is true that anti-aging medicine, though, has been plagued with entrepreneurs that will prey on the hope of their customers, who all just want better health and well-being. This has led us down kind of an all hype, no hope position, and makes the public question any medical advancement, if it's legitimate or not. So Gregor mentions next that since COVID, science has been labeled a dirty word in certain circles, and he has even had scientists that he has known be sucked into a variety of conspiracies. He does warn that this book may not be for those who are not willing to look at medical and research evidence. He acknowledges that prestigious medical journals have been forced in recent years to retract papers over concerns of data integrity. However, despite all this, scientific journals are still the gold standard for establishing the best approximation of truth about our shared reality, particularly in regards to health. So he also goes on to paraphrase Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill once said a quote around the lines of, "Democracy is like the worst form of governance except for all others." And in the same way, Gregor mentions that peer-reviewed medical literature is the worst way to establish facts about our health except for all others. I do want to take a moment quickly and describe what a peer-reviewed medical journal actually is. I think people hear this, they don't understand what it means, but there's just a natural legitimacy around it. So it's basically when an article is published and then it is reviewed by other experts in the field to ensure that the research is accurate and valuable and reliable. This process helps maintain really high standards to ensure that the information that's being sent out to the public is trustworthy and useful. I did include a sliding scale at the bottom of the slide that describes the most to least legitimate sources of medical publications. I do want to make a note, though, that every type of journal has its reasons, but when you're talking about the promotion or the release of, say, like new medications, new treatments, new vaccines, clinical decisions, so basically the decisions that a clinician, a doctor, a physician, a provider is making on how they're going to treat a patient, all of those decisions are made through using the most legitimate sources available. And this includes meta-analyses, randomized controlled trials. Google them if you really want to know the difference. But he does try to source the best of the best. Gregor does then mention the legitimacy of this book. He has worked incredibly hard. Around 20,000 articles were reviewed for research, and around 13,000 citations were taken to build this book. It is a book over 600 pages. Don't worry, it'll be summarized down. And the videos on subjects that did not make the final cut of this book are edited, and they're free online at nutritionfacts.org. I will say I love his videos personally. They're very quick and to the point. Speaking of my personal reasonings, this is why I've been impressed with Gregor's work as a nurse and then future aspiring provider. I've noticed that he has not shied away from sharing citations or seeking out critique. Nutrition Facts is a free website and a nonprofit organization. Sensational commentary in his writing is limited, and if there is sensational commentary, at least it's cited. So if there's any type of emotional, passion, at least you can go and look at the data. There is accessible and typically free or low-cost suggestions on how to improve health. Again, I have mentioned 20,000 papers went into the writing of this book. And also, I think in a day and age where everything is sensationalized to please an algorithm or please, some sort of marketing ploy, there is something about finding truth in the boring. All right, so Gregor goes on in the preface with a quote stating, there may be no such thing as dying from old age. And this refers to a study that was done of more than 42,000 consecutive autopsies. It was found that during these autopsies, centenarians, those are individuals who live over the age of 100, they were all found to have died from a disease in 100% of cases. However, most of the centenarians were considered, even by their physicians, to have been healthy at the time of death. The most common cause of death was a heart attack, and this data was found in 2 other studies. One study focused only on centenarians, and another study focused on people older than 85. Gregor then argues that if old age is the greatest risk factor for most of our killer diseases, one could argue that the leading cause of death is actually aging. So I'm going to repeat that again. So if old age is the greatest risk factor for our killer diseases, one could argue that the leading cause of death is aging. So death rates increase exponentially in age-related diseases, so heart disease, cancer, stroke, and dementia. An example of what we mean by this, like the leading cause of death is aging, is that an 80-year-old with high cholesterol has a 500 times higher risk of a heart attack than a 20-year-old with the same level of high cholesterol. So if aging didn't matter, why does the 80-year-old have a 500 times higher risk of a heart attack than a 20-year-old? They have the same level of high cholesterol. So Gregor then goes on to discuss when he was a young kid, how when he was in school, his goal was to, become a doctor because he wanted to cure cancer. However, he learned through his research that if all forms of cancer were eliminated, the average life expectancy in the United States would only increase by approximately 3 years. Dodging cancer, he has learned, would only mean delaying death, and this death would eventually come from something more common, like a heart attack or a stroke. If one age-related illness doesn't kill us, another one will. And he kind of calls this, he refers to this as whack-a-mole. So progress in decelerating aging could address all these potential issues simultaneously, hence this book and this book review. So Gregor then goes on to ask the question, is aging itself a disease? And this has been a very heated question in gerontology circles for decades. There have been arguments that aging is natural, but so is getting an infection, and we call that a disease. There is also the argument that aging is universal, however, everybody gets the common cold too. Now, the other question is, does it matter if aging is a disease? Like, does the label matter? And yes, it actually very much does. And we're going to give the example of obesity. So obesity was declared a disease by the NIH in 1998. I don't have it on here, but in 2013, the American Medical Association then voted that it was a disease as well, or that they recognized it as a disease state. So a lot of benefits came out of this medicalization of obesity becoming a disease. The first was awareness. So this shifted public perception, and it recognized obesity as a medical condition rather than just a lifestyle choice. This raised awareness of its health implications, and the need for medical intervention grew substantially after this time. The second area that benefits from this label is insurance coverage. So because it's now diagnosed or classified as a disease, this can influence health insurance policies and increase treatment coverage. It can also increase access to individuals to seek medication, and then it can drive investment from companies looking to capitalize in this expanded disease market. The next is research funding. So because it's now considered a disease, the government can provide research grants and monies toward groups and organizations to research obesity, because it's now considered a disease. And they're typically going to prioritize giving out funding towards disease research versus, something that's not considered a disease, because that disease label makes it be identified as having a severe impact on health in the country. Next is the pharmaceutical industry impact. So there's a greater inclination to invest in research and development into drugs that actually target diseases. Pharmaceutical companies spend billions of dollars in investment, and not just like R&D, like scientists looking at through microscopes. It's then going to set pharmaceutical companies' eyes on acquiring companies that may be working on obesity-related drugs from in these smaller pharmaceutical companies. So normally they wouldn't have considered acquiring a company, but maybe they've realized that, this one company's working on a Wegovy, for example, so they want to then purchase that company, acquire it, and then they'll be able to speed up the chances of that drug getting to market. And then lastly, public health initiatives. So governments and healthcare organizations can now, because it is a disease state, implement public health initiatives aimed at preventing and treating treating this disease, and the new programs and funding can then be addressed. So an example of this, so I just want to kind of give a timeline. So obesity was labeled a disease in 1998 by the NIH, and then in 2013, the American Medical Association acknowledged it. And then now in, 2021, 22, 23, 24, we're at the point where we have drugs like Wegovy. Again, it's not necessarily, this isn't like a black and white, like first this, then that. Naturally, I don't know the history of semaglutide, Wegovy offhand, but you can see now, because of this label, we do have specific drugs that are targeting obesity. So think of how far we can come in 10 years or 20 years and with the NIH standards. So this is a big question coming up. How long do you want to live? This was a survey done to around 1,000 people. The options in answering this question were 85 years, 120, 150 years, or indefinitely. So when the question was asked in this first way, 2/3 of the group voted that they wanted to live until 85. However, the question was then reframed to, how long do you wish to live in guaranteed mental and physical health? 42% of the people chose to live indefinitely, and 80% of the 1,000 people chose to live to 120 years or longer. And this really concludes that it's not how long we live, but how well we live. And then Gregor kind of gets into this point on health span versus lifespan. And to be honest, these next couple slides kind of hit home for me. So only 18% of people can be described as undergoing successful aging. So by the age of 85, more than 90% of people may have at least one disease, and on average, they have 4 diseases. Gregor comments that not only, are people not aging that gracefully, but we are living more years in sickness than in health. And he follows up with these next stats. So a 20-year-old in 1998 was expected to live 58 more years in 1998. A 20-year-old in 2006 was expected to live 59 more years. However, 20-year-olds in 1998 were estimated to live for 10 years with chronic disease, and today it's estimated more now to around 13 years. So we're actually living longer, but we're living sicker. We also now are living 2 fewer functional years, which means you are living for 2 years longer where you cannot do the following: walk a quarter mile, stand or sit for 2 hours without having to lie down, or stand without special equipment. So again, and it makes sense. Like, what's the point of living longer or living to X amount of years if you can't enjoy your life? So the truth is that we have a tremendous amount of control in our health destiny, but we need to be grounded, I think, in our attempts and approaches towards this, and we need to be open-minded in seeking out this truth. So there's 2 points that I want to mention before I move on. The first is just a couple thoughts on terminology. So I want to talk about remission versus cure. I want to talk about why most likely you'll never hear a medical professional or nurse, someone in healthcare use the term cure, or you're cured, or we cured you of XYZ. So remission is more of, again, that terminology around the medical system that we use. It acknowledges that the disease symptoms have reduced or disappeared. However, we acknowledge that it may return. Some diseases, in particularly with the immune system, or if they involve multiple organs, can have subtle manifestations that may not be entirely eradicated. And remission, the term, is used to signify that the disease is controlled, but not necessarily eliminated. Cure implies the complete and permanent elimination of a disease, which can be challenging to prove indefinitely. So, for example, viral infections like herpes or HIV can remain in the body even after symptoms are managed. Understanding, and then also too, I think the scientific literature and just the wording, we're very conservative in, how we use that term, because it comes down to the end of the day, we can't go into every little nook and cranny of your body and see if there are absolutely no cancer cells. When you're getting to a point of remission, it means that we cannot detect the illness or the symptoms of the disease within your body. However, we can't, again, see everything. So I just want to make note that the word remission may seem disrespectful, or it may make certain people feel helpless, and it's like and kind of develop this idea or this mentality of, what's the point? I'll never be cured. And it's not meant to be. It's really just meant to have more of a conservative approach to what can actually and realistically be done. But it should not stop someone from embarking on lifestyle changes that will bring about very, evidence-based, proven methods of healing. And also, I do want to give my opinion on longevity and why it's important. And I think that my opinion aligns with Gregor's in many ways. So I do not care if I live forever. That is not my priority. I care to not die prematurely. And I care that I don't die slowly from a long, painful, chronic, or disabling illness. And my goal is to share information grounded in evidence-based information that is grounded in accessible, realistic steps that are proven to reduce the chances of someone experiencing a long, painful, chronic, and disabling illness. I think that we should really get our grounds and get our bearings before we get into wacky sci-fi ideals of living forever. Gregor then discusses, getting back to the book, he quotes how man will never be contented until he conquers death. And the next little section is pretty inspirational. He talks about the immortal jellyfish. There's apparently a jellyfish that can, regrow itself when it experiences damage. There's rumors that this jellyfish there can be, this jellyfish I think is like around 66 million years old. There's hypothetical ideas that maybe there are jellyfish around in the ocean that are this old. I don't know. That'd be cool. There's the theory that technically we do live forever because our sperm and egg cells are the only type of cells that can live forever. I mean, if you think about it. And then also too, just it's kind of like given the possibility, like these like microscopic cells have the ability to grow a brain. And it's really this idea of like if that's possible, what's not possible with biology. Gregor then mentions how scientists, ironically, have been incredibly skeptical of scientific innovation in the past. He notes how several Nobel Prize winners said that nuclear power was childish bugaboo. Clearly, we've proven that wrong. And then Lord Kelvin, who was a really great scientist in the late 1800s, he stated that heavier than air flying machines were impossible a year before, and he doubled down on this type of sentiment and rhetoric a year before the first flight at Kitty Hawk. So, kind of more in the space of anti-aging, Gregor does mention that genetic mutations in worms have already been proven to lead to a tenfold lifespan increase, and then dietary and genetic manipulations in mice have yielded a 70% increase in lifespan. And these results, though, however, while they have not been replicated in people, we need to be conservative in this thinking, however, but if we do get to a point where we discover interventions that not only slow aging but also repair the accumulated damage that we've all gathered from aging, the sky is really the limit. I did want to just throw this quote in, and it kind of does speak to, this is not by Gregor, this is by Brian Johnson, who's another longevity guy out there. We do not know how far we can go yet. So really why I like to talk about this stuff is that we don't know yet how long we can live, and we don't know how quality of a life we can live yet. So we should do everything within our power to maintain what we have and reverse as much damage as we can now while the science is catching up with our ideals. So I want to break down what the parts of this book entail. So it's really 4 books in one. So section 1 of this book, which is the next section we'll be discussing, it focuses on slowing the 11 aging pathways. So this section discusses the metabolic pathways that have been discovered to contribute to aging. So a metabolic pathway is like a set of instructions that our cells follow to turn one substance into another. And these instructions can vary from converting food into energy, building or repairing cells, and handling various other functions. So this type of section discusses 11 of the most popular that have been discovered, and then how we can modify and maintain them through diet and lifestyle changes. This is going to be an awesome challenge for me to be able to dive into more scientific mumbo jumbo, but be able to kind of explain the why behind it in a very simple structure. I'm very excited. Section 2 focuses on optimal anti-aging regimens. So this section dives into the behaviors of the blue zones, the areas of the world with the highest level of centenarians. It discusses the best and worst foods and beverages and why. This is very important. Like, I don't like when people tell me that I shouldn't do something, but I want to know the why behind it and the evidence that backs that up. But they also talk about the longevity vitamin ergothioneine, we'll get to that, and then the best exercises and sleep routines. Section 3 gets very, very specific. Each chapter is broken down by a particular area, so I meant to say hair, not har. So these will be pretty interesting. And then section 4 is what Gregor calls Dr. Gregor's anti-aging 8. He discusses various topics in this area. So nuts, greens, berries, just like the best of the best. Pre and probiotics, caloric restriction, protein restriction, NAD, it's a type of chemical. My favorite area was the xenohormesis and microRNA manipulation. That's very interesting. Again, another more scientific area that I'll be able to break down. So The next episode we'll be starting section 1, the slowing the 11 pathways to aging, and we'll be discussing AMPK. So, see you then. Look forward to it.